Would you love to learn how to make sourdough bread fresh in your kitchen and have it available every single day? I'm Kristen with She Works at Home, and I'm going to teach you that entire process today. It's going to start with having a good starter. Now, the starter is just fermented flour and water. If you don't have a starter, we can go into that another time, but we're going to assume that you actually have a starter that's ready to use. So this is my starter. And what I want to do is first, before I feed this starter, it is very hungry. You can tell by the fact that it just kind of looks a little bit dull and it has a strong smell to it. So you know that it needs to be fed. But this is a little bit much. I only want a little bit in the jar to start out with, because then once I feed it and then it doubles, we want it to fill up this jar. So if I start out with too much, it's going to overflow. So what I'm going to do is, this is my discard jar. So this is all of the discard, or the sourdough starter that I don't actively need. I'm going to pour it into here, and then this can be used for things like discard recipes, pancakes and such. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump some of this out until we have just a little bit left in our jar. So now we have just a little bit left in here. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see how much starter is actually in this jar right now. And I discarded a lot, so really, I mean, it's barely covering the bottom of this jar. So what I'm going to do, however much starter I have, I'm going to add the exact same amount of water. So I'm right kind of down here with the starter. So I'm going to add just enough water so that it is now doubled. So I'm adding the same amount of water as I have starter into this jar. We'll only need a tiny bit. All right, that's about good. So now you can see the starter's here, the water's here. So I have the same amount of water as I do starter in this jar. We're just eyeballing it. We can go into how to measure this if you want to be very specific, but this works great for me. So we're going to mix this together, the starter and the water. And then what we're going to do, this is the last step of this process, it's very simple, is we're just going to add our organic all-purpose flour to this to this water and starter in the jar until it gets very thick, a little bit thicker than pancake batter. So we're going to add just a little bit at a time. And mix it together. Actually, that was about perfect. If it seems like it's like a little bit too thick, you might have added a little bit too much flour, that's okay. Just go ahead and add a little bit more water to it so that is mixable but very thick. So I would say this is a little bit on the thick side, so I'm going to add a tiny bit more water to that. Had a little bit of starter in here to begin with, since I discarded so much, so I really did not need to add much flour. Okay, perfect. So this is what it should look like when it has a good consistency. Now, that is all we need to do with our starter. So last step of this process is you want to take a rubber band or something of that nature and put it around your jar so that you can monitor when your starter has doubled. So our starter is starting out right here. So when it gets to about right here, then I know it's active and ready to use. Okay, so we're back. Our starter has more than doubled, so this is a great sign. It is ready to be used. It started out right here at this rubber band. It has tripled. So, at a great pace. This is the texture of it, or the consistency, I should say. Has lots of bubbles, almost a mousse-like consistency. So what we're going to do now to make the dough is we're going to pour our starter into a bowl. I have it on a scale. I like to weigh the starter. You don't have to, you can measure it out if you would like, but I like to do it by weight, and I do grams. So I have my recipe right here, and I will post this. We are going to make 2 loaves. This is a medium size batch, and so we need 260 grams of starter. So I'm going to pour this in here, and we should have 260 grams. Okay, we're just a little bit over. Okay, we're at about 276, which is close enough. I could scoop a little bit of this out if I wanted to be exact. Okay, we're at 258, that's a little bit closer. Okay, so now we have our starter. The next thing we need to do is add in our water. So to make 2 loaves, we need 2.5 cups of filtered water. So I'm going to add that. And then we need 1 tablespoon of salt. You could use Himalayan or sea salt. Sprinkle that in. And I like to go ahead and mix it at this stage. So go ahead and mix these things together. Okay, and then the last thing we need is our flour. Oh, and the oil. Almost forgot about the oil. One more thing. And we'll use 1/4 cup of oil. You can use olive or avocado are my 2 favorites. Now we're ready for the flour, and we're going to use 1,000 grams. This is another thing that I do like to weigh just because it's easier when you're pouring it in. It would be 7 cups or 1,000 grams of organic all-purpose flour. So I'm looking right here, I'm at 881 grams, so I'm going to add in 1,000 until we get to 1881. Which is fine. We can just scoop some out if we went over. It's not a problem. Alright, that's 1883. That's close enough. Alright, so now we're just going to mix this all together. And I'll remove my scale now. Mix this. And this will be a very shaggy dough, I think is what you consider it. So I will start to mix it with my dough whisk. You don't need a dough whisk, you could just use a spoon. I happen to have one, so I'm going to use this. And it will get kind of tough to mix. Alright. Now at this stage, I mixed it as much as I could with the dough whisk. A lot of times I'll just mix the rest with my hands, so sometimes it's easier if you wet your hands to do this, but to just really get those things incorporated. All right. Okay, so that is it. Now you can use any kind of bowl as well. Recently I started using this bowl, which is actually an Instant Pot bowl. But you can really use any bowl, but the benefit of using a straight-sided bowl is you can see when it has doubled. And that's going to be key because sourdough has so many different facets to it. And if you ferment it too long or too less, you're going to get a different result. So little tools like having a straight-sided bowl where you can see when it's doubled, that's gonna really work in your favor to just give you some more concrete, oh, okay, my dough is ready, versus having to just kind of figure it out and guess. So we're at here, this is what our dough looks like now that it has been mixed together. This is going to sit now for anywhere between 7 to 12 hours, and this will double. Okay, now during that time, we're going to do something called stretch and folds, and I'll jump back on here for that, and you can see what it's like to do a stretch and fold. That will be our next step, but for right now, we need to let this sit for maybe 30 minutes to an hour and let it, like the dough soften up and kind of absorb all those ingredients. So I won't be able to do much with it now if I try to do a stretch and fold. It needs to sit, it needs to rest for a little bit, and so we are going to let it do that. I have this lid right here, which is just a silicone. It has a little starter and stuff on it. A silicone lid, but you can use a tea towel or, you know, just any kind of lid if you want. So I'm just going to gently put that on there, and we're going to let that sit, and we'll be back for some stretch and fold soon. Okay, so the next step in the process is something called stretch and folds. This is where you are going to stretch and fold your dough instead of kneading it like a traditional bread. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the dough up, stretch it, and then fold it over. Rotate our bowl and do that again. Keep rotating our bowl, stretching our dough, and folding it over. We're going to continue doing this until the dough is not stretching anymore. So I'm about at the max right now, maybe one more. And you can do this really as often as you like. There's not a set amount of time. You can do this every hour, you can do this every few hours, however your schedule allows. Okay, that's about it. So now this is going to sit when this has doubled in size throughout the day while I'm doing my stretch and folds. When it has doubled, that's when I know it is done with the bulk ferment, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, now our dough has doubled, so this is ready to go into the refrigerator for a cold proof. This is going to increase the health benefits by allowing it to continue fermenting, but at a much slower rate so that it doesn't get over fermented. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take out our dough and put it on, I like to use this silicone mat just because it doesn't stick to it. You could use a cutting board. And I'm going to make 2 loaves out of this. So I'm just going to use my dough scraper and cut this in half. So we have half it here, half it here. Okay, and it does help sometimes if your hands are a little bit moist. So I'll see if I can do it this way. Okay, I like to just kind of gently flatten it. And then again, there's many different ways that you can do these steps, but for this one, I typically like to just kind of roll it, and then I flip it over and roll it again. Sometimes I'll do it one more time just to not have it look like it was necessarily rolled. And then, so this is what it will look like. And then I'm going to place it right over here into my bread pans. You can use, these are silicone, which I discovered recently, which I've been enjoying using, but also I will use parchment, works good, parchment paper in a bread or a stoneware pan, that works good too. So there's some different ways you can do it. If you also, cast iron is another great option. They also make silicone bread slings, which work great if you're trying to avoid the parchment but still want to do it in cast iron. Okay, so that's what it will look like. The next step is I will put it in a large 2-gallon or 2.5-gallon Ziploc bag before placing it into the refrigerator. I gently seal it. And that is all for the next step. So this will go in the refrigerator for anywhere from 6 hours to really up to 3 days. You can keep this in the refrigerator and just have it ready to be baked for whenever you would like a fresh loaf of bread. And then the next step will be taking it out of the refrigerator and we will score it, and I'll show you how to actually get it in the oven. Okay, so now that our bread has cold proofed, we are going to take it out, score it, and then put it in the oven. Now we can use a bread lame if you have one, otherwise a knife works fine. You can do whatever design you would like for this. You want to go about 1/2 inch down if you can. Okay, so now we are going to place this in the oven. I'm going to put it on 400. And you don't need to wait for the oven to preheat. You can just go ahead and place it right in on the lowest rack that you can. And then we will know it's done when it's a nice golden color on the top and the bottom. I'm going to set my timer for 35 minutes and start checking it after that point. Okay. Let's check our bread now. It should be done. All right, good. This has baked for about 45 minutes now. I added a few extra minutes. It has a nice golden color on top, and then you always want to check the bottom too to make sure it has a nice golden color on the bottom as well. That looks good. So we're just going to gently, it's hot, but lift that out and put it immediately on some kind of cooling rack so that it can cool completely before we slice it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and slice our bread. It's always so exciting because you never know with sourdough exactly how it's going to come out. So let's see. All right. Good. I like the texture of that. Looks great. All right, guys, so that's sourdough from start to finish. I hope you enjoyed this. Go ahead and subscribe if you'd like more tips and tricks for around the home.